I sucked at high school. I really did. It wasn't because I was unintelligent, and it wasn't because I was this menace. I was just a bad student. So when all my friends were going off to college after graduation, I decided to pursue my passion and to go on an adventure. And the first place my adventure took me was to Nicaragua on a short-term missions trip. Now, I learned two very valuable things while I was there. The first was that the children who we were so blessed to work with, they lived in cinder block homes with no running water and no electricity, but they still knew the words to every single Justin Bieber song. And I have proof on YouTube of this. The second thing that I learned that was very valuable was that if you volunteer to mow someone's lawn there, you're not going to be using a gas-powered push mower. You're actually going to be using a machete to stoop down as low as you can and cut the grass as low as possible. So if you volunteer to mow someone's lawn, it's going to take a lot longer than just a half hour. The second place my adventures took me it was to Maine, the North Woods of Maine, kind of near the Quebec border. And there I learned as an apprentice under another survival aficionado guy named Tim Smith. And Tim is an enormously experienced man. He's worked on TV shows like Man vs. Wild, and he lives in a tent for about 8 months out of the year, which is crazy. But it's there that I really learned my passion of wilderness survival and of adventure, and that's really where it took flight, was on that adventure to Maine. But after that, as every scuba diver needs to come up for air every once in a while, I headed back to society. And that's where I learned that I really still sucked at being in society. I bought a Jeep that broke down a lot, and all of the expensive meals and the heavy traffic and the hipsters really started to wear on me after a while. So I decided to contact my buddy Tom. And Tom lives out in the mountains of Arizona. The best way to describe Tom is if I took Davy Crockett and I took Nelly the rapper, remember him? And if I put them together, like if they had a baby, that would be Tom. And so I sold my Jeep so I could buy a plane ticket to fly down to Arizona. And there we learned all about desert survival and mountain survival. We lived off of, after I learned after a while, these MREs, which are army rations that Tom had found in a dumpster before I got there. Delicious, as well as some lizard meat from a lizard that I hunted. We also evaded the border patrol, as well as some drug traffickers on the border, all the really fun stuff you get to do when you're on the Mexican border. And I lived under a torn-up army poncho the entire time, so it was really a blast. And once again, I headed back to society, but this time I'm really a mess because I've lived under a tarp for like 147 days total over the last 2 years. But this is where our story takes a very, very important turn. I walked into a coffee shop and I was there to work on my blog when I saw a poster with a picture of this girl. And that's where I learned about the organization Tiny Hands International. Now, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around everything that Tiny Hands stands for and what they work against, so I'm just going to give it to you straight. Every year, 10 to 15,000 girls between the ages of 7 and 23 are deceived and taken across the Nepali border into India, where they are forced into a life of prostitution. They're raped up to 40 times a day. It's extremely likely for them to get HIV or AIDS, and the odds of them seeing their families and their loved ones again, even if they survive the brutality of their captors, is slim to none. The trafficker seeks out a girl. He convinces her that there's either a husband or a job waiting for her there in Nepal. And she follows him willingly into the trap that is sex trafficking in India. And when I learned about all of this, it really made me take a look inside of myself. And I had always viewed the people who are close to me in one category. They were my people, my family, my friends, even the little girl who I see on my way to work every morning. Those were my people, and if I went through life normally, I would just have to interact with them, and that would be great, and I'd be super happy. But then there were those people, the people thousands of miles away, who had these terrible things happening to them. And if I went along with my regular life and ate bad Chinese takeout and watched The Office every night, I don't have to interact with them at all, no matter what's going on the other side of the world. And I think for Americans, because I can't speak for any other country, because I've never lived anywhere permanently other than this, but I think we're hardened to injustice around the world. We see something in the news, and all we do is we turn over and say, "Oh, honey, people are getting massacred in Africa again. Could you pass the eggs?" And so I said to myself, what can I do to fight sex trafficking? Well, after reading a little bit further into Tiny Hands International, learning what they did to fight it, I knew exactly what I was going to do. See, Tiny Hands has a way to intercept these girls before they even come into contact with the brothels in India. They have highly trained border monitors that sit there on the border waiting and watching for signs of sex trafficking. They spot the vans or the buses that are transporting these girls. They stop them, and they interview the occupants, finding out why exactly they're traveling into India. And the great thing about this is, every month, approximately 200 girls are actually saved from a life of forced prostitution and likely death, which is just amazing, the work that Tiny Hands is doing over there. But I figure if I can raise funds for this, they can save even more girls than they're already saving. So I devised a plan. Here's my plan up on the screen. 3 steps, pretty easy. The first, find a remote wilderness area. Must be intimidating / scary. So I decided on the Gila Wilderness of New Mexico. The second, trek across it, utilizing my survival skills along the way. I was going to tell everyone about this on my blog, raising awareness for what's going on. And, of course, the last one, look very carefully at that. Live, hopefully. And I thought, if I can raise enough awareness for this, and if I can get people to donate money, we can make a real difference. It was kind of like, in my head, a bike-a-thon on steroids. And so I took off for New Mexico, but all along the way, there were these things built up inside my head, and they kept piling on each other until it seemed like they formed this wall that wanted to stop me from doing anything to fight against sex trafficking. And I call that the what ifs. What if I'm days away from civilization and I break my leg? What if no one ends up donating to this expedition? And what if no one cares? Well, I had to take that wall and find a way to break it down. And how I did that was through the why. Why was I going on this expedition? And the why, to fight sex trafficking, to save these young girls, overpowered every single what if. And so I went off to the Gila Wilderness. There it is, pretty intimidating place. I decided to just go for it. Because in your life, you're always going to have a reason to not do something. Everyone's always going to say, it's too far away, it's too cold, it's too hot, it's too dangerous, you can't do that, you can't go there. So just go for it. And there I have all of the necessary materials to hike approximately 100 miles across one of the most remote wilderness areas in the US. We have a can of sardines, a little bit of rope, a handful of granola, all the necessary requirements. I hiked approximately 18 miles per day, slept 2 to 4 hours every night. I was constantly dehydrated and always exhausted. But it was one of the most challenging, yet one of the most rewarding things that I have ever done. And at this point, a lot of people start asking me questions like, how much money did you raise? Well, the best way to answer that is without an answer. You see, sex trafficking didn't stop when my expedition stopped. It is an industry that grosses over $30 billion internationally per year. In fact, exploitation of women and children for sex trafficking is the largest growing criminal enterprise. My efforts through this one little expedition amounts to barely a slap on the wrist. The expedition isn't over, and we need to keep fighting, and we need to outsurvive this terrible injustice. So I'll leave you with a question. What are you willing to do for freedom? Thanks, guys. Woo-hoo.